Naked Singularity, an idealistic New York public defender burned out by the system on the brink of disbarment and seeing all the signs of the universe collapsing around him, decides to rob a multi-million-dollar drug deal of one of his clients. This film stars the likes of Bill Skarsgård, who you know from the likes of It, Olivia Cook, who you know from the likes of Ready Player One, and John Boyega, who you know from the likes of Star Wars, of course, and various other movies. The film was also co-written and directed by Chase Palmer, who was a producer on It, the more recent version of It. And you know what caught my eye about this movie? The poster, because the poster looks pretty damn awesome. Look at this thing. It looks like a spectacular movie poster, and when they put that much effort into the artwork, you go, okay, they're going to put a lot of effort into making the film look really cool. It's going to have something really special about it. And with a title like Naked Singularity, you go, okay, this could be an interesting sci-fi movie. Well, what I got in the end was one of the most disappointing movie experiences I've had all year. Now, this movie is based on a book by Sergio Della Pava of the same title, Naked Singularity. Now, I haven't read that book, but I can tell from the story alone within this movie that's an interesting book. I'm sure it's a very well told story, and I wouldn't be surprised if the book was heavily used to get some of the actors involved in this movie, because the story seems interesting on the face of it. Where this film has been massively let down is the interpretation of the book, the filmmaking, and heavily in the sound department. We'll get into all of that. As I say, the story seems interesting, and within the first 30 minutes I was engaged with this movie. I was very interested, and the story seemed to be bubbling along nicely, and it had a bit of intrigue to it. But slowly the story started to slip away, and I started to notice things like the poor dialogue and the very unnatural speaking of some characters and what seemed like bad performances. But I don't think it was as much bad performances as it was bad dialogue and poor direction given to the actors. This film had a lot of potential, as I mentioned. It doesn't particularly have any outstanding visuals for a sort of sci-fi movie, and that's one of the issues with the movie. It doesn't really know whether it wants to be a crime movie, or a heist movie, or a sci-fi movie, or a comedy movie. Even the little synopsis I gave at the start has a lot within it. We've got a public defender who's disenchanted with the system. Life's not really going his way. He's got a client who's involved in a drug deal, and he's going to heist this drug deal. But at the same time, he sees signs of the universe collapsing. There's so much within that, and yet the movie's only an hour and a half long. It's a lot to squeeze in. And that's another issue the movie has. It tries to force everything along too quickly, and that leads to problems. What you end up with is a muddled up story that makes you go, okay, what's happening? A minute ago they were in a courtroom. Okay, now there's this drug cartel, where did they come from? And that's another thing within this movie. Certain characters and I guess big parts of the story just appear. Like there's a cop duo investigating things, and they only appear halfway through the movie. I don't get the significance of them within the movie. They didn't really add anything to it or take anything away from it. They were a bit unnecessary. I'm sure they were in the book and had more relevance, but in the movie they just seem very forced in there. And then there's a scene about, I'd say, 3/4 of the way through the movie where a guy's at an auction for a car and a drug cartel come along and outbid him. And they've been minorly referenced earlier on, but they just appear out of the blue in the movie. And overall, it's just poor storytelling where they try cram in things for the sake of it. But as I alluded to earlier, the main problem with this movie is the writing. Some of the dialogue is exceptionally forced, and it leads to the actors looking like they're giving poor performances pretty much from everybody. And the thing that shows me that it's poor writing is that everybody suffers from this. It's not that one or two actors seem to be putting in bad performances or overdoing certain lines. They're all doing it throughout this movie, and that would indicate it's because of the writing and directing they've been given. But the other big issue this movie has is the sound. For a YouTuber or someone getting started online making videos, or someone just making videos, that's not a big issue. You know, you'll get used to it. But for a Hollywood movie with a budget in the millions, a big chunk of that money should go to making your film sound spectacular. And this movie sounds awful. In this movie, whenever the music kicks up, the dialogue pulls down and you can't hear what actors are saying. And then music becomes way too loud and you just can't hear what they're saying. And other times actors are speaking and you just can't hear what they're saying. Their speech is very muffled, and it's not because of the way the actors are saying it. It's either because of the way it was mixed or because of the microphone placement when they were recording it. But it leads to a lot of issues where you miss key information or you miss things that the actors say, and all of a sudden you're going to another scene going, why is this actor in this room? Oh, this other actor invited them into the room. In the last scene we just didn't hear it because it was so muffled. For example, there is a scene where John Boyega's character walks Olivia Cook's character home during a blackout. And when they get to the door, they have a little bit of a conversation. She goes to the door, he says goodnight, goes to walk away, and she turns back and says something. Now it sounds very much like she says later, as if, you know, just a goodbye. Later, see you later. But I had to rewind it multiple times and try to decipher what she said because it was so muffled what she said, mainly because she would have had her back to the microphone if they haven't ADR'd it. I think she said, are you not coming in, or do you want to come in, or something to that effect. It took me 3 or 4 attempts to figure out what she was actually saying. But in the next scene, John Boyega's just in her apartment. And this isn't just a one scene thing, this is all the way through the movie. It's hard to hear the dialogue, it's very muffled and poorly mixed. It's a shame for a movie like this, which seems to have an interesting story on the basis of it. As I mentioned, it seems like the book is very interesting. It's one I hadn't heard of before I watched this movie, and it's certainly a book I'm going to check out because the story overall seems interesting. The execution of the book within this movie is very poor, and I put that solely on the writers and the director. So as I mentioned earlier, Naked Singularity is a film I was very much looking forward to and ultimately let me down with some poor filmmaking. So when it comes down to a rating, it's a tough one because it's not the worst movie I've seen. As I said, there's some intrigue to it, some poor execution, a terrible ending, and overall I'm going to give it a 2 out of 10. But I would really love to know people's opinions on Naked Singularity. Did I miss something? Could you see past the terrible audio and the terrible dialogue? Let me know your opinions on Naked Singularity if you've seen it in the comment section below. And if you haven't seen it, check it out, come back here and let me know all about it. Now with that being said, I would greatly appreciate if you could do me one little favour if you're new here to the Movie Film Show. Let's jump below this video, hit that subscribe button, maybe even a notification bell as well for new content every Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday. And with all that being said and done, thank you so much for watching.